Following the devastation of World War II, the Allied powers faced the immense task of addressing the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime. The Nuremberg Trials, held between 1945 and 1946, were a pivotal series of military tribunals designed to prosecute prominent leaders of Nazi Germany. These trials were instrumental in establishing legal precedents for international law, particularly concerning war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. This detailed examination delves into the historical context, procedural framework, key figures, major indictments, and the enduring impact of the Nuremberg Trials. Historical context. The aftermath of World War II. World War II ended in 1945 with the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany. The conflict had resulted in unprecedented human suffering, with millions of lives lost and vast destruction across Europe and other parts of the world. The discovery of the Holocaust's horrors, where 6 million Jews and millions of others, including political dissidents, disabled individuals, Romani people, and homosexuals, were systematically exterminated, further underscored the need for justice. Formation of the trials. The idea of prosecuting Nazi leaders was conceived even before the war ended. The Allied powers, comprising the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and France, agreed that a judicial process was essential to hold those responsible for wartime atrocities accountable. This led to the establishment of the International Military Tribunal, IMT, in Nuremberg, Germany, chosen for its symbolic significance as a stronghold of Nazi rallies and as the location of the Nazi Party's annual conventions. Procedural framework. Legal foundations. The legal basis for the Nuremberg trials was established by the London Charter of the International Military Tribunal, signed on August 8, 1945. The charter outlined the framework for the trials, defining the categories of crimes to be prosecuted. Crimes against peace, planning, initiating, and waging wars of aggression in violation of international treaties. War crimes, violations of the laws or customs of war, including the treatment of prisoners of war and the killing of hostages. Crimes against humanity, atrocities committed against civilians, including murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, and other inhumane acts. The Tribunal. The tribunal was composed of judges from the 4 major Allied powers. Each country provided 1 main judge and 1 alternate judge. The judges were United States, Francis Biddle, main, and John J. Parker, alternate. Soviet Union, Iona Nikitchenko, main, and Alexander Volchkov, alternate. United Kingdom, Sir Geoffrey Lawrence, main, and Norman Burkett, alternate. France, Henri Donadieu de Webers, main, and Robert Falco, alternate. Prosecution and defense. The prosecution was led by chief prosecutors from each Allied nation, with Robert H. Jackson serving as the chief prosecutor for the United States. The defense counsel was composed of German lawyers appointed to represent the defendants, ensuring they had fair representation in accordance with legal standards. Key figures and defendants. The Nuremberg trials targeted the highest-ranking officials of the Nazi regime. Of the 24 major defendants, notable figures included Hermann Göring, Reichsmarshal and Hitler's designated successor, responsible for the establishment of the Gestapo and the concentration camps. Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy Führer who had flown to Scotland in 1941 in an attempt to negotiate peace. Joachim von Ribbentrop, Nazi Germany's foreign minister, involved in orchestrating the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact and other key diplomatic initiatives. Wilhelm Keitel, head of the German Armed Forces High Command, instrumental in planning and executing military operations. Ernst Kaltenbrunner, chief of the Reich Main Security Office, overseeing the Gestapo, the SD, Security Service, and the Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing units. Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments and War Production, responsible for the utilization of forced labor in the German war economy. Major indictments and charges. The indictments at the Nuremberg trials were comprehensive, encompassing a range of criminal activities conducted by the Nazi regime. Key charges included: conspiracy to commit crimes. The prosecution argued that the defendants had engaged in a conspiracy to commit crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. This charge aimed to demonstrate that the atrocities were not isolated incidents but part of a coordinated plan orchestrated by the Nazi leadership. Crimes against peace. The defendants were charged with planning and executing aggressive wars in violation of international treaties, agreements, and assurances. This included the invasions of Poland, Czechoslovakia, and other countries, which had precipitated World War II. War crimes. The prosecution presented extensive evidence of war crimes committed by the Nazi regime. This included the treatment of prisoners of war, the use of slave labor, and the murder of hostages and civilians in occupied territories. Crimes against humanity. The most harrowing charges were those related to crimes against humanity. The prosecution documented the systematic extermination of Jews in the Holocaust, the brutal medical experiments conducted in concentration camps, and other inhumane acts perpetrated against civilians. The trials. Opening statements. The trials commenced on November 20, 1945, with opening statements from the prosecution. Robert H. Jackson's powerful opening speech set the tone, emphasizing the unprecedented nature of the proceedings and the moral imperative to hold the Nazi leaders accountable. Presentation of evidence. The prosecution presented a vast array of evidence, including documents, photographs, and films, as well as testimony from survivors and witnesses. Key pieces of evidence included the Wannsee Conference minutes, which detailed the plan for the final solution, and footage from the liberation of concentration camps. Defense strategies. The defense employed various strategies, including challenging the legitimacy of the tribunal, denying knowledge of the atrocities, and arguing that they were following orders from superiors. Some defendants, such as Albert Speer, admitted responsibility and expressed remorse, while others, like Hermann Göring, remained defiant and unapologetic. Verdicts and sentences. The tribunal delivered its verdicts on October 1, 1946. 12 defendants were sentenced to death by hanging, including Göring, who committed suicide before his execution, Ribbentrop, and Keitel. 3 defendants were acquitted, and the remaining received prison sentences ranging from 10 years to life imprisonment. Legacy and impact. Legal precedents. The Nuremberg trials established several crucial legal precedents that continue to influence international law. Individual accountability. The trials affirmed that individuals, including state leaders, could be held accountable for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity. The concept of crimes against humanity was codified, providing a legal framework for prosecuting atrocities committed against civilian populations. International cooperation. The trials demonstrated the importance of international cooperation in prosecuting crimes that transcend national borders. Influence on subsequent tribunals. The Nuremberg Trials served as a model for subsequent international tribunals, including the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, ICTY, and the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, ICTR. These tribunals continued the legacy of prosecuting war crimes and crimes against humanity. Establishment of the International Criminal Court, ICC. The principles established at Nuremberg were instrumental in the creation of the International Criminal Court, ICC, in 2002. The ICC provides a permanent international tribunal to prosecute individuals for genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes of aggression. Human rights movement. The Nuremberg Trials had a profound impact on the global human rights movement. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948, was influenced by the principles articulated during the trials. The declaration set forth fundamental human rights to be universally protected. Criticisms and controversies. Despite their significance, the Nuremberg Trials faced criticisms and controversies. Victor's justice. Critics argued that the trials represented victor's justice, as only the defeated Axis powers were prosecuted while the Allies' wartime conduct went unexamined. This perceived bias led to questions about the impartiality of the proceedings. Legal and procedural issues. Some legal scholars questioned the legitimacy of the tribunal, arguing that the trials applied ex post facto laws, meaning they prosecuted actions that were not clearly defined as crimes under existing international law at the time they were committed. Selective prosecution. The selection of defendants was also a point of contention. High-ranking officials from other Axis powers, such as Japan, were tried in separate tribunals, and some individuals involved in Nazi crimes were not prosecuted at all due to various political considerations. Conclusion. The Nuremberg Trials were a watershed moment in the pursuit of international justice. They established critical legal principles, set important precedents for the prosecution of war crimes, and laid the groundwork for future international tribunals. Despite facing criticisms and challenges, the trials remain a landmark in the history of human rights and international law. The legacy of Nuremberg continues to shape the global effort to hold individuals accountable for atrocities and to uphold the principles of justice and human dignity.